our friends over at France 24, and we're going to look to have on our good friend James Andre, hopefully in the next week or so. He's now back in Paris to get the perspective of the Macron government and so forth on all of this. We'll get James on the program. But let's bring in our good friend. Again, he is the Renaissance man of the Jeff Santos Show. He's a great musician. We'll get into, the music and how that changes people's views on war in Vietnam and concerns over health care, concerns over poverty with Live Aid in 1980s in Africa, and so on and so forth. He's also, of course, the executive director of Democracy Watch News, a reporter, has covered everything going back to the year 2000 with what happened in Seattle. He is with us every Friday at 5:33 p.m. Eastern, 2:33 Pacific time. We say hello to Mr. Mark Taylor-Canfield, MTC. Hello there.
Hello from the rock and roll city, the city of Jimi Hendrix and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden.
There you go. Yes,
hey,
indeed.
By the way, Jeff, I just picked up on this news story that the former Fresh Prince just slapped Vladimir Putin, and I think he's also slapped Donald Trump and a few other people for good measure. And also,
April Fools! I hear you.
Just forgave all the student debt today. The Congress voted on a bill to provide free college education, and they're supporting Harvey K. and Alan Minsky's Economic Bill of Rights. And
anything else you want to get into it?
Yeah, scientists actually finally did discover.
Is Seattle going to win the Stanley Cup next year?
Absolutely. The Kraken just won the Stanley Cup. The
Russell Wilson's coming back to the Seahawks.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully some of those things will come true someday, but right now it's all an April Fool's joke. Yes, indeed. It is April 1st. April 1st, no matter what year, we hear a lot of wacky things. Oh, my. Well, it is true what is happening, the war in Ukraine, and it is sad to look at, as I just reported, of that situation with Russian forces blocking aid to get into Mariupol, which has been devastated by Russian bombardment and missiles. It is interesting that the guy who worked for Time magazine is named Simon Schuster. I don't know if Simon and Schuster got together and had Simon Schuster, but anyways, all that being said, kudos to him and all the people who are covering the war zone. And I must tell you, because you've talked about Reporters Without Borders, it is to me extremely important to talk about the role of reporters. We had James Andre from France 24 on a couple of weeks ago, and he was in Kyiv. It is dangerous. It is very, very hard work, and only a few of the handsome journalists get on TV. If you watched Oliver Stone's, I think it's Salvador, that was made quite evident, in that in that film. But I know you have some thoughts on this, Mark. Before we get to some other questions that we had talked about.
Yeah, I mean, today is the first day of the 2-day International Symposium on Online Journalism. So this is obviously a discussion that's taking place during this 2-day online and in-person event. There are a few limited things that are happening at the University of Texas at Austin through the Knight Foundation, who's putting this on. But it's a really great event where there are, world-class journalists and people on the top of their industry, and we get a chance to ask some questions and learn and go through workshops. And, right now, I'd say Reporters Without Borders, Committee to Protect Journalists are really focused on Ukraine because Russia has a really bad reputation. They're way down in the ranking right now in terms of press freedom anyway. And so it's no surprise. And, and journalists also, speaking of El Salvador and the Oliver Stone film. He's done some other. There have been some really great films about journalists, by the way, and that's one of them. Another one is called Double Edge, and it's about a journalist trying to cover what was happening in Israel. But you have this whole thing about, or in Palestine actually, but we have this whole thing about, freedom of the press in the United States, and we've had our own problems with Donald Trump. We're currently ranked 44th in the world in terms of press freedom, so we have a lot of work to do in our own country.
That's right.
But during wartime especially, and Walter Cronkite talks about this in his autobiography, Life of a Reporter, the truth suffers often in wartime, and so one of the ways of trying to keep the truth from being told is to keep journalists away from the fields of action, the conflict zones. So that's always a problem. I do remember talking to Chris Hedges one time. He took me out to dinner, me and my girlfriend, and told me, Mark, don't ever be a war correspondent. You'll never be able to sleep. You'll have insomnia. You'll drink too much, and it's like it's not a good thing. And, so I feel bad for those folks who were on the front lines and the journalists who were trying to get into the country and being, threatened and under danger because, it takes a special kind of person to want to do that. And a lot of times you end up having to put your entire personal life on hold during these times. I know as a journalist, a lot of times when there's a breaking news story, you just have to stay up for days to cover that story, and it doesn't matter. We've had that in Seattle, especially during the Black Lives Matter protests, and then during the Occupy movement when there were, protests happening every day and the police were using the concussion grenades and tear gas. It's a high-tension situation whenever you're in a zone of conflict, whether it's domestic or, a foreign war. And so my heart goes out to all those journalists. Maria Ressa, won her Pulitzer Prize Nobel Prize, partly because of her work under a dictatorship and a tyrannical regime, which when she won that Nobel Prize, she was still under threat of being imprisoned, by her own government. So we have this going on all over the world. And to see,
no doubt. I mean, what I think is happening here is that there are a lot of things that go unreported for sure by both American media and of course we're seeing as a whitewash of facts in Russia. They're closing down media left and right, and literally people have to leave their country. And again, I'm not trying to stick up for the United States here, but at the very least, we're not kicking people out of the country. That being said, there's a lot of injustices done to journalists here in the United States. So you can go into the Assange thing and everything else. Let me take you to some more positive things here, and I don't want to get a call from John who has something to talk about. You mentioned Chris Hedges, who's having his YouTube channel deleted of his RT broadcast, which is really outrageous. But I want to talk about the progressive voice in Seattle, and it's obviously Swan, it's others, but it's Jayapal, and we were talking earlier about what our good friends Larry Cohen and Alan Minsky have talked about in getting a majority of Democrats in the House to increase the progressive caucus to about 100 members this year, and I would like to see maybe get to 120 by the end of 2024. True progressives, folks who follow the Economic Bill of Rights, which Minsky and Harvey Kaye have obviously been talking about, and we talked about earlier today. But Jayapal is a key piece of this. And I think she could be Speaker, which would open the door for someone like Omar from Minnesota. And I think our good friend John, who we'll go to in about 60 seconds, probably has something to say about it. It could open up a lot of different doors. But is Jayapal at all, trying to make her way to Speaker? I mean, is there anything that is suggesting that she would like it? Because I know that they're talking about Pelosi for another couple of years and all this and so on and so forth. And then Jeffries is being bandied about as the pick for Pelosi, who's another neoliberal out of New York City. What are you hearing, my friend? Mark, can you hear it?
Sorry, I accidentally muted myself there. I actually, we had this track going in the studio, so I had to turn myself down for a second until they shut it off. Hey, guys.
Okay, we're having and Mark is being invaded by his drummer and bassist. So okay, tell him you got half an hour. Come back at top of the hour. Okay, you got to do an interview.
Exactly. They're leaving right now. All right, you guys are out of here. You're banned. Okay, so look, if that's the only problem I have with them, then that's doing pretty good. But no, Tom Foley was a speaker. You know, he was a very powerful person in the U.S.
That's
Congress.
right.
We've had people like Magnuson and, of course, Jim McDermott was around for 14 terms. Henry Jackson. I mean, these are like major players. Now we have Maria Cantwell and Patty Murray, which are considered kind of old guard in terms of the Democratic Party. You know, they've been around for a long time now, you know, as state senators. But I don't know. I don't know whether she has higher aspirations or whether she's just amazed, you know, that the leadership in Congress has given her any voice at all, considering how strident she is on a lot of progressive issues. You know, I mean, she promised when she ran in my district here to always be a progressive fighter and never back down. And so far, you know, she's proven that. She's one of those candidates, amongst others like Doyle Canning running for the 4th Congressional District in Oregon, and then also Jamie McLeod Skinner, who's running for Kurt Schrader's job, the Joe Manchin of
Right,
House
we've heard a lot about Skinner. She's a rising star. I know Alan Minsky has had her in the conference call that they do on Sundays and on other days of the week. So go Skinner, go. Maybe we're going to try to get her on the program as well. All right, let's go up to Minneapolis and talk to our good friend John. He has a couple of things to say. I guess you would like to someone like Omar to be the progressive caucus chair. That would help Minnesota, I would think, too.
Yeah, and she's very focused, charismatic, and intelligent, and I think she could pull that off very easily, and hope that that happens. And I also wanted to say something about RT and Hedges.
Right.
You know, we have to understand that essentially, RT was an agency funded by the Russian government, but they were really allowed to do quite really interesting journalism. And the idea of Putin, if he had any inkling about what was going on, he looks at freedom, press freedom, and our kind of society as a weakness. And this is what he is battling. You know, he wants an authoritarian, totalitarian, kitschy kind of czarist regime for, with himself as being a person for life until, I guess, he appoints somebody else or dies or whatever. And this is where we're at. And, Hedges, he's a brilliant man and has served his time well in journalism. And I got all of this from Amy Goodman, which I listen to religiously every morning, and everybody should. She deserves a Pulitzer and then some, and a Nobel and whatever. Yeah,
no doubt about it.
I've been doing it for a long time. She's been a true blue journalist from the beginning and never backs down either. So she's a great person.
And she just tells the story. She tells the truth, and she has an army of people to help her to do that, and she would admit that's not all herself, but she directs it, and so does Normeen, and they have a producer. It's a brilliant show. It's absolutely great, and this is the way journalism used to be, and she's keeping it alive, and thank God she's alive.
I went to visit her in New York City when she was. I had to broadcast from the old abandoned fire station because there was no station that would let her broadcast.
I visited her
off the air for that.
Yeah,
well, she's a great journalist. And, I mean, if I could throw in a plug here, you should listen to Amy in the morning and Jeff in the afternoon. There you go, morning and afternoon drive.
I do.
That's right, John. You're an example of it. So. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and Amy is great. I had dinner with her also and had a tour of her studio. she's just a very welcoming person and really believes in democracy, which is very radical, obviously. You know,
it's great journalism, and it's a really great understanding of.
And he has persisted in doing his thing to further democracy and truth and speaking truth to power.
No doubt.
Yeah, well, you know,
well said.
It's
said,
like
John.
a sandwich, folks. You get Amy in the morning, and then Jeff in the drive time on the East Coast. So it's a perfect, bookends for your day. But yeah, no, and you got Harvey on here today, which was great. And Harvey, thank you so much for retweeting some of my posts on Twitter. I really appreciate that. You're a great guy, and I appreciate what you're doing too. So we're kind of mutually supportive there. And there's a lot of good stuff going on with bands. We were going to talk about that, Jeff, about
let's get into that actually, and thank you for John for that thought. And again, Hedges is a great journalist too, and of course what Amy has done there in New York is just fantastic. And
yes.
I met her years ago. Yes,
authentic. Both of them. So
yeah,
highly recommended.
Highly recommended. Well, let's talk about the impact of people from the outside. I've often talked about the fact and retweeted what you said today about the New Mexico governor, that others who were involved, a good friend Stephen from California, on Twitter today about the New Mexico governor and student loans. Going to school for free there. I would love to see an outsider, like a New Mexico governor, be the potential nominee for the Democrats in 2024, if indeed President Biden, at 82, decides not to run. And that would be a great thing. And I think outsiders as a whole, and whether we're talking about Eddie Vedder or Pearl Jam, or we're talking about our buddy Dave Grohl, the Foo Fighters, or whomever, they have a role. The impact. We've seen what Bruce Springsteen has done. We've seen going back to the 1960s in people like Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. I mean, Neil Young at almost 80 himself, really put a hole into the whole Joe Rogan thing. So, they have a big impact, whether they're, aging rock stars like, Young and so forth, or younger guys like, like our friend Eddie Vedder, who's late 40s. So, your thoughts about this? Because you're right in the middle of it. And of course, even though I think Vedder grew up in Chicago, his formative adult years are spent in Seattle, and Grohl originally from Washington, D.C., and by the way, mom's a school teacher, and he's proud of that. It's another push for our good friend Melissa Tomlinson, school teachers at Badass Teachers. This is something that to me is important if we want to push the agenda. We always talk about that on the show, whether it's the Economic Bill of Rights or whatever. But this plan, I know that he doesn't call it an agenda, Harvey and Allen, but this goal, to implement it, to be a real action plan, not just a bunch of paper. It needs to be also supported from the outside, and I know you have a lot to say on this.
Yeah, I mean, wow, Paul, this is something that you and I have talked about, the lack of political support from artists, so the bands have really stepped up on this. I think when journalists across the planet see what's happening, and they're focusing on it every day, like what's happening in Ukraine, that really draws attention. So in the larger picture, there's actually the possibility of a new hopeful way of looking at things, and that is that people are actually coming together in a way that they weren't before. And to see these bands and to see Brian May from Queen, of course, one of my favorite guitar players of all time, next to Jimmy maybe, and he was really influenced by Jimmy too, he said. But, Pearl Jam coming out and saying, making their statement, which I'm kind of not surprised just because they tend to be a very political band. And they're the only, band I know of that put together 2 huge shows at Safeco Field to raise money for homeless shelters, so, I mean, that's pretty cool. And they always seem to be political no matter what, whether they're fighting Ticketmaster over ticket price gouging or whether, there's something going on in Ukraine. I think it would be nice to also hear them, maybe, and some of these other musicians. Even Elton John has been speaking out, to talk about, other issues besides just the Ukraine, but maybe what's happening in our country in terms of no access to free education for most people, for really high tuitions, for incredible amounts of student debt, for increasing poverty amongst, young people who are just coming out of school, having to work these minimum wage jobs where they can barely afford to pay their rent. So it would be great to hear Eddie Vedder talk about rent control, or hear Brian May talk about what's happening. He did actually mention, though, in his very long Instagram post, Brian May did talk about some pretty political things, including the U.S. invasion, of Iraq, and how that wasn't really justified. So, he's trying to, not play favorites. He's just saying, look, when humanitarian atrocities are happening, you got to speak out against it, no matter where it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, if this happened with SBS and what happened to Khashoggi, the journalist, Washington Post, this is just human rights. This is just awful, disgusting, evil kind of stuff. I mean, regardless of whether it's Putin or SBS or if it happened in other countries. And of course, what the United States involvement in Iraq was also the same. Hey, I want to get in just a few seconds. Caller from Los Angeles, talk about Hollywood. Our good friend Tom in L.A. Has a point. I got about 30 seconds, Tom. You can go right ahead.
All right, Jeff. Yeah, first off, we the people are the government. Second, I am a proud FDR Democrat. Second, right. Third, I would like to say that, we need to get people doing exactly what you did, Jeff, earlier in the show today, where you say housing, health care. And we just need to get those simple words like that. We don't need to be doing a whole long diatribe. We just got to say those key words. That, the not just the second Bill of Rights, because no one's going to understand what that is, but it's about health care, housing, food, clothing, shelter, like I said before. Those are just humanitarian type things. And, thank you, the gentleman from Seattle. I can't think of your name right now.
Mark Taylor-Canfield.
Mark Taylor-Canfield, yep. Thanks, Mark, for what you do. And, rock on. I hope that, Dave Grohl, can come up. But I need these guys just singing the same song. Do you care about health care? Do you care about a living wage? Do you care about education? Leave it at that.
Amen. Thank you, man. Appreciate it, Tom.
It's been great to hear Dave Grohl speaking out against Reverend Phelps and his homophobic, religious fanatics in Kansas or whatever. But it would be great also to see him talking about health care and other issues. By the way, you can check out my article at the Seattle Star. It's my annual April Fool's Day article, so that's kind of a spoiler about what it's going to be like. But you can check that out at theseattlestar.net. They're a great group in Seattle. Omar Wiley, the editor, is amazing. So thanks, Jeff.
Hey, thank you, Mr. MTC. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend, my friend. I want to thank, of course, Ron Carter for producing this broadcast. Thank all you. Great conversations today. Greatest callers in radio. And, of course, I want to thank the weekend for coming up. I'm looking forward to that. Until Monday, have a great weekend, folks. Keep out fighting peacefully. My name is Jeff Santos, and right now it is my time to say I gotta go.